So I was a little afraid of it because again, the inspiration was so stunning to me that I was afraid a little bit of failing, which is another problem. We can't be completely afraid of that. It's a little scary, but you have to accept a little bit of failure. So yeah, I just just sit down and do it. I'm like, I feel like sometimes we get so in our heads about things. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can do it, and it's just like, just do it scared.
Welcome to the BoldBrush Show, where we believe that fortune favors the bold. Brush. My name is Laura Ringlebear, and I'm your host. For those of you who are new to the podcast, we are a podcast that covers art marketing techniques and all sorts of business tips specifically to help artists learn to better sell their work. We interview artists at all stages of their careers, as well as others who are in careers tied to the art world in order to hear their advice and insights. Today, we sat down with Hilary Scott, a tonalist landscape painter based in Massachusetts. Her work is all about capturing gorgeous scenes in reality that she then imbues with her inner vision to create an even more beautiful scene. We discuss how she went from illustrator to realist plein air painter, how it's better to paint afraid than to never attempt to create at all, the importance of maintaining a vision that is just beyond your comfort zone, and that the only true failure is when you stop trying. Finally, we discuss great advice for anyone seeking to start plein air, and excellent advice for those who are seeking to become a full-time artist. Welcome, Hilary, to the BoldBrush Show. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on. I think it's awesome what you guys are doing here on Bold Brush for artists, and I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you. Yes. And we're happy to have you, of course, because your artwork is stunning. Like, I was
Oh,
looking
thank
through your whole
you.
website. You're welcome. I was looking through your website, and the very first one that comes up, it's like this river. I forget the name, but it's a river, and you have the snow, and you have the
Oh,
sun.
the
Just,
snow.
oh, it's gorgeous. Oh.
That was one of my favorite paintings to paint. And honestly, before I painted it, I was afraid to paint it because it was just so gorgeous in person that I was like afraid I wasn't going to be able to do it justice. So, of course, I did my little study, like I
Mhm.
always do, little, experimental studies, and I wasn't sure about it. So I like just let it sit for a while. But long story short, it probably became my most well received painting that I've done yet. So it was honestly, it blew me away. It did very well when it was out in the world. I did a few drafts of it just to kind of in different sizes, but thank you.
You're
I,
welcome.
that has a special meaning because I've just, from my childhood, I think the nostalgia of it, of just like a snowscape. I always found them so magical, and I'm always drawn to that type of subject matter. So that was a passion project for me.
Oh,
And
I love
I
that.
love that painting that. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Yeah, it also for me it also has that sort of and I think that also comes down to the tonalism aspect of it. But before we dive into that, do you mind telling us a little bit about you, who you are, what you do?
Sure. So I am a creative. I've always been doing something creative, whether it was music, theater, art, of course, right from when I was very young. So that was just part of who I was. And then, eventually I had to pick a lane. So I played the piano for 20 years. I kind of dabbled in that songwriting and everything. I just art was something that kind of always came natural to me. Like I just was always doing something creative. I did all through my childhood. I was going to, art camps and taking art lessons. And so, it just seemed like the natural progression that I would choose that as my major in college. It wasn't the most practical choice, of course. There's this, thing that, people kind of like, oh, it's not, you can't make a living with art, which of course isn't true. But,
Hmm.
that's one of those, fallacies that some people buy into. For me, that was always my goal, is to somehow find a way to get paid to do what I love to do more than anything else. And it has not been easy, but it's been a lot of failures along the way. But back to, I've gone through a lot of different styles too, and finding my voice. Starting back as an illustrator, I majored in studio art, but it was a concentration in illustration because I always loved just the whole fantasy. Like, when I was a kid, I would always, have children's books read to me, but I would just get lost in the pictures. And there was just something about them that just moved me, and I find them so magical, like especially the lighting effects. The my favorite illustrator was always Chris Van Allsburg, because he illustrated these books, especially the Polar Express, speaking of
Mm,
snow. And he just found a way to bring them to life, because it was like clearly fantasy. It was fiction, but the way he would do it in realism, to model these objects to make them look real. It wasn't like a cartoonish type of style. So I was always drawn to that. And so when I was in college, I that was kind of my natural, inclination, I guess. One of my professors saw my style and it was very illustrative. So it was like, well, let's just go ahead with this illustration, because you can get work in illustration. And that's what I did. I just went with it, and I loved it. I loved every minute of it for a long time, until I started to just want to raise the bar a little bit. And that's not to say that there's no respect in illustration. I think for me, I just wanted to prove myself to myself and to other people that I could do more. I could do illustration, but I could do other things. I could make something look even, realistic. And so I now paint landscapes, and I can't see myself painting anything other than landscapes. At this point, I'm so passionate about them that there was just no looking back. Once I jumped into them and kind of got more confident with them and more comfortable painting them, because that was a very slow learning curve for me to switch from the illustration chapter to the fine art, and to be, I guess, taken seriously as a fine artist versus an illustrator, just an illustrator. And that is unfortunately kind of a hierarchy thing in the art world. It's like, oh, you're just an illustrator, which of course, isn't true. There's so much skill involved in that, but it's just kind of maybe a little bit of a different skill set. Slightly, there's some overlap there, but I think in general, I just wanted to be able to do something else and to succeed at something else. So that is
that's
where I am now. That's kind of my path in
that's
a
I
nutshell.
mean, yeah. No, I love that because I think there's so much value to illustration, right? Obviously, as children, we're exposed to it, just like you were, I was, obviously. And I think for realism, I find it to be another excellent tool of, understanding something and its essence, because when you think of illustration, of course, you as an illustrator know this, it's very much something that's pared down to its representation, but in sort of like a almost in a symbolic way, but you still have to retain the essence of it, right? And that actually brings me to a good question, which I've always been curious. Where do you think that line is drawn in between illustration and realism? Where does it lie?
I feel like there's kind of a spectrum to it. So like illustration can be so abstract, like, or it can be so like cartoonish and just very flat, that it's like comics. And then
Mhm.
you can get into photorealism, which is it's absolutely exactly what you see. And those are like the two opposite ends of the spectrum. And then of course there's like, there's some overlap in there. And when I was doing illustration, I felt like I wasn't strictly fantasy. Like I always wanted to kind of bring these scenes to light with real, like the skill of realism. But it was obviously a fantasy scene. So I would paint like fairies and trolls and all this, which is of course not reality, but I would
Mhm.
do them in such a way where I'd get models for my figures, and I would look at real objects like trees to try to get them rendered three-dimensional. And that was kind of like, I thought I was, you know, not strictly illustration. I was kind of like a little bit realism. I always was just very fascinated with people that could paint things realistically. And there was a time where I seriously admired the photorealism. I do think it's admirable. It's not something that I want to paint, but there was a time where I was like, wow, that's the ultimate mastery of, realism. So, and then, you know, I guess I'll say when I was doing my illustration, I was thinking that my work was more realistic than it was, because I was trying to do some of these paintings of landscapes. I would add a figure in it. It was mostly my children were modeling for me, or other people's kids. I would use them and I would put them in a landscape. And I was thinking, oh, wow, this is like very unique. I'm like, I find, it's like they're portrait landscapes and there's the realism, but it's not completely realistic, because I thought that was boring. I'm like, some of these realistic things would be like, they're done so realistically that there's no imagination in them. So I think for me, I was trying to bring a little bit of that. I was trying to balance the two, of like illustration and realism, but it wasn't being interpreted that way by other people. So I was like, I would try to enter maybe some of these into shows and they would get rejected. And then I would get feedback from other artists, well-meaning, of course, I'd get critiques and they're like, well, your work is illustrative. And that was just the word that kept coming up over and over again. And I was trying to figure out why is this happening? Because it's not really what my intent is. And I think if you have an intent of something to be, then that's okay. But it was just like, there was a disconnect. And that was kind of my breaking point. So back to the line being blurred with the illustration versus fine art. So I was just over it. I'm like, I want to be able to paint something that's taken seriously, like fine art, but so I did a complete 180. And I think I was like, oh, now I'm going to paint exactly what I see. I'm going to try to paint exactly what I see, just, there's no room for any imagination. I don't want anyone saying fantasy. It became a really dirty word to me. I'm like, don't call my work fantasy. And of course, I did that for a little while. I had to learn some skills on how to change my palette up, because that was a big obstacle for me. Learning the color palette to make something, be interpreted as realistic. And so I did that for a while. And then, eventually I realized that my true voice my illustration that was where I started, but there is still that my voice as an illustrator does remain in my fine art in some ways, although I found a better balance for it. So, through learning all the skills on how to control the color, I will paint what I see, but I feel like what's key in my vision is that I'm incorporating some imagination into my work. So that's where I think the artistry comes in, because anyone can just sit out and, paint exactly what's in front of you. But I think for me, I put my unique stamp on it and I try to add elements in there that are consistent with the lighting situation and what actually is happening. And I try to weave those elements into my work so that I get just what my vision is, to try to, convey that to my viewers. And so I think that's where it's blurred a little bit, where it's like, yeah, I took some elements, some of the things I used to incorporate into my paintings were strictly illustrative, strictly fantasy. And I think I get bored if I'm out and I'm just painting exactly what's in front of me, because then it's like, I think there's a quote that we're not reporters, we're poets, so we don't have to report exactly what's in front of us. I think we need to learn how to paint it as it is first, which was critical to my journey in finding this balance. Is that I think if you're going to change things up and add things in that aren't really there, you should at least know how to paint it the way it is seen first. So I did spend some time just learning how to paint right what was in front of me, not what I thought I knew, but what I actually saw. And that was through plein air, of course. And at this point, I think it's just so much fun for me to just kind of imagine what something might look like in my head. I can create whatever I want. Like, we're the artists, we have a artistic license. And so I just love that I feel comfortable at this point to do that without crossing that line into fantasy. So I can actually bring these elements in that may or may not be there, at least move things around, change some lighting situations, do different things to my paintings and experiment. And no one is calling them fantasy anymore. So that was a big deal for me. And it took a long time to get there. And of course you can go too far with it and make something that just doesn't work, because there's no semblance of reality to it. But that is kind of where I ended up here. And so I think there was a quote somewhere, and I honestly can't remember who said it, but it was kind of like the ingredients in a successful landscape painting. And
Mm.
I'm gonna just kind of paraphrase. It has like a little bit of mystery, a little bit of magic, and I can't think of the other one. So, but for me, that's pretty much what I'm always trying to convey. For me, a successful painting has some of those elements in them,
Mm.
but it does remain true to the scene. So I still kind of, take my original source material, which can be plein air studies, some photographs, definitely, memories, and just all weave that all together and come up with something that I can put my own stamp on of with my style.
Wow. That was a lot of wisdom, actually.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're welcome. I think what I really love about that is, I do agree that there are a lot of paintings out there that they're beautifully made, right? Especially in realism, beautifully made, but they don't leave any of that magic or mystery. They just like present you with this thing and it's like, okay, that's nice, but I like that your
Right.
work takes it to that mystical, dreamlike sort of level, which I think um is also thanks to your background in illustration. Because, like when I look at a Rembrandt painting, I look at the person that he paints and I'm like, no one looks like that. Like no one looks like that, right?
Right.
But at the same time, it's still realistic enough where it's still realism, right? It's not a cartoon or illustration, but I feel like he's like kind of like your work, like in that realm of it's not reality, but it's real enough where it lets you dream a little bit, lets you like,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
mhm,
You know what's funny?
mhm,
My favorite example, which comes up all the time, so if you know me, you know what I'm going to say, is Maxfield Parrish. Pretty
mhm,
much was the master of this. And of course, he did start out as an illustrator, and then eventually he went to his real passion was for the landscapes. But he didn't leave his illustration behind completely. It was, you can see it like woven into his paintings. It's like you've never seen that place before because that place doesn't really exist. Like maybe he used a little bit of, I have his book and I've seen where he lived and he has some, it's gorgeous landscapes where his inspiration came from. But honestly, it's like no one can come on. That place doesn't exist other than inside of his head. However, he made it look like it could exist. And it's dreamy. And I think that's a great word to describe what I'm trying to accomplish in my work is like a dreamlike type of place, a place that is calming, that there's a mood, a visceral reaction from my viewers. It just brings up some sort of a memory or some nostalgia. Just it's just not enough for me just to make a pretty painting. It
mhm.
was just it pretty just wasn't enough for me. It was like there was a time where I've gone through it all. I've gone through all the phases where I thought, it's like the more detail I put in there, the more true I am to, I paint every single leaf, every single blade of grass. And I'm like, it's going to be a better painting. Instead, that's the opposite. It's the ones I started learning how to simplify things and really just hone in on a theme. That's when my work started to, move to the next level where it was like being, you know, it just, people were responding to it
Mhm.
in a better way than
Right.
before, where it's like, oh, that's nice. It's like, and I think that's kind of what I love about the tonalist style is that it's very simple. And I love also what I had to do so much work on my knowledge of color for many years. I was trying to make sunsets that were neon, like I just thought they were so bright, and like I had to relearn a lot of things
Mhm.
through just my own exploration, and I did take a bunch of workshops. And what I love about the tonalist is that they can balance that, the color chroma, where it's like a hit of color will really sing because the whole thing is a lot of tones of gray.
Yep.
So that was really the part where I needed to get to a certain level of what's the word I'm looking for? Just competency, I guess, and just knowing how to control the color, how to control the chroma. Of course, value is super important in for anybody. But yeah, it was the chroma and
Mhm.
learning the color theory, I think, which I assumed I was like, I don't need to do this. And like, I already learned this in college. But no, actually, I did need to learn it because my work was not going anywhere the way it was,
Mm.
just with my skill set, just hit a wall. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the other side of, realism, that it's 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 almost like deceptively easy, right? It seems like it's easy uh to, pop out these gorgeous landscapes, right? But it is such a delicate balance of hue, value, chroma. And then to
Yes.
top it off, you want to manipulate the scene in such a way where you know where you want your viewer to be looking and where you want them to stay and guide their eye. It's like, oh, there's so much to composing a good image.
It's so true. I think that every painting I do is like it's like a puzzle, like this jigsaw puzzle that like I see the inspiration. I am very moved by it. I'm like, I know it has to be a painting, but then the real work starts where I'm like, now my head's spinning because I'm like, how do I set this up? I'm like, I know what I kind of have an idea of what I want the end image to be and what the feeling I want from it. But other than that, I'm like, I mean, where's the horizon line going? No, like, where am I cropping this? Like, what format does it need to be? Like, just all of that. It's like a puzzle. And I don't feel like it gets any easier. I feel like, there are certain subjects that, like, over time you do them enough that they become a little more comfortable for you. But it's like, I'm always trying to push the envelope. I don't want to ever feel comfortable to the point where I'm like, I'm not challenging myself. And then, of course, there's the excitement in when you are trying to embark on a new idea and you know that you have to get it out some way. Like, I'm like, I have to paint this. And it's like, it's a little bit outside of comfort zone. There's like that just nagging thought of like, can I do this? And that excites me because I'm like, I feel like that's a challenge. And I'm like, I want to overcome this challenge somehow. Sometimes I have to, I'll get my vision will exceed my skill level a little bit. So I'll just shelf things for a while. I'll come back to them. I'll kind of look at, I'll just have to go back to the scene a few times. I'll have to do a lot of sketches. I'll do a bunch of studies. There's so much work behind the scenes that goes on that people never see. Like, you see this, you'll see the final painting. There's like a fight, like there's like, there's so much fight that goes on internally, and just frustration and shitty paintings. Like, for every one painting there might be like two really shitty ones that you don't see. And I don't know, I just want everyone to know that we all struggle. And I love to see when real master artists, and when they kind of bring that to light, where it's like, oh, I'm really struggling with this painting. And it's like, we all struggle, because if you don't struggle, you're not really growing as an artist. There should always be, the bar should be just set just a little bit higher than it was before. And for me, that's key. And I'm never bored. Like, but yeah, sometimes I'm frustrated because I'm like, I so desperately want to like just kind of bring my vision to completion. Like, I want to, we all have something to say as artists, and something moves us when we're out in our just our general journey, walking through life, and we see inspiration. I'm like, I just can't let certain things go, and I'm like, I have to find out how to paint that. And if I don't know how to, I'm gonna get help, and I'm gonna do that. So I sometimes will ask somebody, I'm like, can you critique this? Can you give me some tips? Like, I don't know, that's kind of what I'm always, yeah, trying to.
Yeah. Yeah. Trying to, I think what I love that you just mentioned is not setting that bar too high, setting it just high enough where you're doubting, but you're still motivated enough that you
Oh,
can you can tell yourself, oh, I can do this. I just gotta, push myself a little more, because it could be so disheartening if that bar is too high and you don't reach it, and then, you spiral.
I definitely think so. And there are certain subjects, don't get me wrong, there are subjects that at some point in my career, I would love to be able to tackle them, but I know that there's just no way that I'll do them justice at this point. So I just kind of take it, just things that are just outside my comfort zone, that are just a little bit uncomfortable for me, but I know I can do them. And I think I have a good idea of that at this point. Like, there was a time back when I was an illustrator and my taste was up here and my skills were way down here. And that was very frustrating for me. And I think that was the breaking point where I was like, I actually do need to sign up for some classes because I really don't know what I'm doing here. And it took me a long time to get to that point.
Mhm.
Because I think when you're younger, there's a little bit of arrogance, like you're just like, oh, I'm like, I know what I'm doing here. And then at some point you realize that you're actually not that good as you think you are. And that's, it's a wake up call. It's a little
Mhm.
bit painful to admit that, but I did at some point. I was like, you know what, I definitely need some help because, if somebody shows me how to do something, I'm going to learn a whole lot faster by swallowing my pride and just going and learning things that I thought I knew, but I really didn't know. So that
Mhm.
was a great learning experience for me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I
And
still
then,
continue to learn them. Yeah.
yeah, no, continue.
And you know what else? I feel like the more I learn, it's like the harder it is. And I know that was another quote that it's like the more I forget what the exact quote is, but it's like painting is so easy when you don't know how to do it. And I think that was for me. I was a little bit delusional about my ability for a long time back, mostly my 20s, early 30s. So I've been at this latest, my landscape chapter for 9 years now. So next year will be 10 years of painting the landscapes. And it has been a long, slow journey. But I just, I've learned so much and it's been painful. As I said, there's been a lot of failures, a lot of rejection. Um, but that's just part of the journey. There's no like easy way. There's no
Oh,
shortcut
yeah,
to
absolutely.
getting anywhere really worth going.
Yes, absolutely. And it's been a fantastic journey too because your work is like amazing.
Oh,
Like,
thank
of
you.
course, of course. And I love that you mentioned, that you struggle and also that the level that you're at, you're still learning, but at the same time, it has taken you a long time to reach this point, right? So it's like for a lot of artists, um, like what happened to you, our taste is up here, our level is down here, and we're, arrogant as well and thinking like, oh, I could totally do that, right? But
Right.
then but then I see work like yours and it's like, oh my God, obviously, the longer you're at it, the more, you step out little by little from your comfort zone and you focus on small incremental growth and consistency, the more amazing your results could be than if you just like have your bar all the way up here and then just discourage yourself every single time.
Absolutely. I know. So some of the things that people wouldn't even realize because I feel like there was some struggle behind the scenes. Like I did some studies and I had to try to figure out what I was doing. But in the last few years, I have broken out just a little bit where I was doing a lot of sunsets. I was doing sunsets marches all the time. And there was a time where they were very hard for me. And as I said, my sunsets were like super oversaturated. They did not look, there was no semblance of reality at all whatsoever. So, I learned how to do them over time. I did a lot of repetition. I painted them over and over again. And now at this point, while they're not easy, I wouldn't say they're easy. They have gotten comfortable for me. And that is a little bit of a little like for me, now it's become like some of my galleries and they're like, oh, we want sunsets, they sunset sell, they sell. It's kind of at this point, I'm like, if I just got stuck in that, like right, like doing sunsets all the time just because I knew I could make money off of them, I wouldn't grow as an artist. So I kind of had to slow down a little bit with that and just do some other subjects that were a little bit just outside my comfort zone, but they were very well within the reach. Like I could do them. I just needed to practice them a little bit and just kind of work through
Mhm.
some of the struggles. So fog was one of those things.
Yeah.
I wanted to explore that a couple of years ago. I started doing fog, and then I ended up, of course, making a painting that really worked. I worked out my problems in the study, and it became a really, well received painting. It did
Mhm.
very well. It went to a national show. It sold, and so did the studies. And then the snow is the other one, is that when I was doing illustration, I was painting snow a lot. It was like, I loved it because it was magical. However, I was not really staying true to the reality of it. I was kind of like, oh, you can just throw around blues, violets, what is the color? What is that bright blue green? Phthalo blue.
Yeah.
I was like throwing that around like it was just like it was so just freely all over the place. And I'm like, oh, this is fantasy snow. And I'm like, I want to paint real snow. And there's a lot of subtleties in snow. So there, of course, there's all the cool tones, but like snow is a very difficult subject to do right. Because if you oversaturate it and if you don't get those subtle hue shifts, it's not going to look right. So I was a little afraid of it because again, the inspiration was so stunning to me that I was afraid a little bit of failing, which is another problem. We can't be completely afraid of that. It's a little scary, but you have to accept a little bit of failure. So yeah, I just just sit down and do it. I'm like, I feel like sometimes we get so in our heads about things. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can do it, and it's just like, just do it scared. So that's kind of what I have done sometimes. Like right now, I'm like trying to figure out how to convey this aerial scene and like how to set up a composition, how to set up an aerial view, which I just plein air painted a few weeks ago, and it's just become deceptively difficult. So I just do it, and I have all these studies here, and they're not quite working, but I'm going to get them to work. So but it's just, you have to do things afraid a little bit, and if you get stuck in your comfort zone, you're really not going to go very far. This has never been solely about making money, because if it was, I would just sit here and I would just paint various sunsets all day long. I've become good at them, where I know it's kind of the low-hanging fruit. So it's like, I know that if I paint this type of sunset over a marsh with the reflections and the shimmer, I'm like, it's probably going to sell. And that's great. I mean, I still like to do them. If I hated to do them, I don't know how I could do them anymore, but I still love them. But I feel like they're bringing me to the next level as an artist? Not exactly. It's kind of the same composition, the same flat, no vertical. And I just wanted to be able to push myself to do some other things, to work some other subjects in there, to keep things exciting, to just, mix it up and just not become like a one-trick pony, I guess. Like I want to be able to do other things and be, I do stay within a certain little rotation of subjects, snow, fog, what else? I do the wetlands a lot of trees. I have some other, I just don't want to do salt marshes all the time. I do farms sometimes. So yeah, I think I have a pretty cohesive style where I'm not all over the place, but I just didn't want to be the sunset lady where I was like, all she paints is marsh sunsets. And so at times the galleries don't have a lot of work, because in the middle of me painting them, and they do very well at selling those, I need to explore some other subjects. I need to experiment, and that takes time. And sometimes there's a struggle. And where there's a struggle, it's not going to be quick. So that's kind of where I'm trying to balance that, where it's like, I need to keep the work flowing. I need to move the work to make money. But at the same time, this is kind of a career for me, where it's not just about making a quick buck. I have to get better. And then eventually that will come back, and it's an investment, you know what I mean? So like, if I can get good at some other subjects and get better at what I do, then of course that will pay back in sales later. But for me, it's me and my journey, and trying to kind of paint the things that I just am passionate about. And some of those things are just they're not easy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think if they were easy, you wouldn't be passionate about them. you know.
Well, I get bored easily. All my jobs that I've had that were not art jobs, I've been painfully bored at all of them. They're repetitive and monotonous, and I was miserable. And I knew that I'm like, the only way I'm going to be able to be happy in this life is if I can just make art every day. And and I challenge myself. I don't need somebody standing over me cracking the whip saying, oh, I need you to do this and that. I'm like, I'll put that pressure on myself, no problem. No one's more critical of my work than I am. Trust me, no one. So this was a good fit for me, but it comes with its, challenges, of course.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. And but those challenges make it worth it. I think at the end of the day, it's like it's so rewarding to, overcome that, oh, I couldn't figure this out and I got it. It's like you I don't know, it's a
There's
dopamine hit.
nothing. Absolutely. To me, there is nothing that creates more confidence in doing hard things and being and overcoming a challenge. And so I feel like if you just again paint things, just stay, easy street and just do that, that's great, like chug along and just do. But for me, I just there's just such a confidence boost when you know that you started just like with this fog. I'm like, my brain hurts, like I don't know how to tackle this. And then you really just like stay the course, you refuse to quit, and eventually you come out on the other side and you figured it out. And now you've learned that skill. Now you know how to make that. And then of course, maybe take a little break, paint another sunset, reward yourself with something a little, just get my brain hurts. So I'm like, I just take a little, because those are they flow easier. And then you go back and you try something else. And yeah, it's just I just thrive doing that, like
Yeah.
learning how to paint something I didn't really know how to paint, but I desperately wanted to learn how to do it. And it just makes you, there's nothing like it, the confidence boost from doing that,
Yeah.
in my
Yeah.
experience.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think that's also why so many of us are drawn to painting, and specifically like how you mentioned, like you tried other jobs and it just wasn't for you. And I resonate with that so much because it's like, God, if I had to describe it, it's like you feel brain dead. Like where's the excitement? Where's the like there's so much that goes into like, I feel like people who are artists, we're all so self-guided and so self-motivated with our passion that, working for someone else can be like so deadening and so depressing. Oh man.
I
But
so feel that.
yeah.
Really resonates because I spent, oh my God, I started working when I was like, I don't know, like 13, 14, all the jobs, right into teaching, right out of college, just to make money. I was a teacher. And then, of course, I took a big detour and I was like, oh, the art's not working out. I was kind of listening to the voices, the negative voices that were saying that art is not a feasible career. And I did fall prey to that a little bit. And I did take a detour, went back to school for something totally different, just to have a sensible job. Of course, that didn't work out because I think eventually, yeah, a sensible job. And I resented it so much. I'm like, I just always felt like, you know, I'm here to paint. And I'm like, nothing is easy in life. Like, no matter what career you're trying to do, like, if you want to be a doctor, you have to go to school for I don't know how many years. Like, no matter what the career path you're trying to do, if it's worth it in the end, if it's going to be difficult. And this has been no different. It's just a different path. And it's been so worth it though, like to get to this point and just be able to say to the people who told me I could never do this, and it's just like it's gratifying. But yeah, there's been $0 shows. There's just been, as I said, so much rejection. It's just a lot of struggles along the way. But of course, those make it worth it too, because you don't quit. The only way to fail is if you really quit. And I think a lot of people, they get discouraged to the point where they do quit. And then of course the narrative is like, oh, it's not possible. Well, it's not possible because you quit and you didn't stay the course and you didn't do everything that you could possibly do to make this an option for yourself. Yeah. And I didn't want to feel like a victim. I felt like, these jobs were like, everyone was saying, oh, this is just how it is. It's like, no one values the art. And I was like, well, I'm just going to be a victim to this, then this narrative that it's like, you have to, and I'm not a victim. Like, I don't have that mindset. My mindset is like, I'm going to fight. I'm going to, I'm going to win. Even if it takes me like 10 years, 20 years, I don't care how long it takes me. It's just, I'm a fighter. And when I have a will, when I say I'm going to do something, I do it. I just do everything in my power, and I don't make up excuses. I don't. That's just how I am. So,
No,
and
that's so inspiring. Oh my God. I
thank
hope
you.
there are listeners will take that and be like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just gonna go for it
Well,
because
I'll
it's
tell you, go
Mhm.
ahead.
Well, no,
No,
I was just
finish
gonna
what you were
say
saying.
because it's like because it's, of course it's scary. Of course it's easier to just like stay in your comfort zone and admit defeat without even getting on the battlefield and even giving it a try. Or it's easy to fall prey to those negative thoughts, which I've had them as well. I've also immediately, when I told my mom, like, yeah, I want to be an artist, she was like, oh, honey, artists still make money. And I'm like, I want to show you.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. It's just, the other thing about this is that if it were easy, everyone would do it. There's a lot of shitty things that you have to do. You have to be willing to do the unfun things. The
Mm.
fun things are painting a painting, to like getting into like just painting, creating. But there's a lot of things that go on that are not fun, that are just like tasks that are mundane, like making color charts and just kind of studying images, like how other artists have solved problems. Like there's just so much like learning that goes on that's not necessarily fun. And again, the same thing is like making paintings that suck and like making them over and over and over again. And the part of this journey which is difficult that I'll share with you is that, like, the whole creative process is not like this linear thing. It's like it ebbs and flows. And I've gotten used to being at this for like 9 years now. There are certain phases in my creative journey where like nothing's working. I'm like, part of it is that I'm trying to push through to do something that's challenging for me. And then other times it's just like for whatever reason, I'm like, I just can't get this painting to work. And then the next painting doesn't work. And the next one. And that's really disheartening. That's difficult, like mentally, to kind of do that. But you just show up. You show up anyway, and you just do it. Just like with anything, there's motivation is not, that's for amateurs. Like you don't come to your easel when you're motivated. You come because that's your job and that's what you have to do. And sometimes I have to go back to the site where I'm like, I can't get something to work. I need to go back and do a study. It's just really being stubborn as hell and tenacious as hell to just kind of, you're like, you just show up. Even if every painting is in like the burn pile, like I feel like I've kind of recently gone through this where I'm just like, I don't know why. I'm like, I just, you get the highest highs where it's like you make everything's flowing. You're making like, 10 paintings that are awesome and you're putting them out in the world and they're selling and they're getting awards. And then whatever comes up must come down. So like you're going to end up with you're going to sometimes get into a little bit of an artist block where it's like, yeah, you kind of don't know what to do next, but you still show up, you still go out, you try to get inspiration, you go out and plein air paint, you fucking show up. Like that's it. Like I don't know what else to say. Like, and eventually you will push through the other side. So I don't freak out anymore when I get into these phases because I know that they're always going to end as long as I don't quit, because the only way to fail is to quit. And that's my wisdom, I guess, for
Oh, it's
for this whole
I love
thing.
it.
Yeah, because I mean, I know like a while back, I would freak out and be like, "That's it, the well is dry." I'm like, I've painted everything that I can paint. I'm like, of course, that's not true. That's ridiculous. But you freak out because it's like when you don't have any more ideas, I'm like, your career's over. I'm like, you have no more paintings to paint. But yeah, you just have to kind of go with it. You have to accept that that's part of the creative process. You're not always going to come up with this like $1 million idea. But you will, and not every painting is going to be amazing. There are paintings that'll be very good, paintings that'll be good, decent, and then there'll be every so often you'll make like a slam dunk, you'll be like a home run. You'll make an awesome painting, and if you hold that as your standard of all the time, you're going to be very disappointed because that's just not realistic. At least not for
Mm.
me. At least not for me at my phase. I mean, I know some artists, they come out with these like blockbuster. I'm like, I can't believe they make these. And I'm sure behind the scenes, they make some duds. But and I know that that's pretty realistic. I don't think anyone just like magically, just waves a magic wand and just creates these, award-winning paintings. So it's
Mhm.
just, comes in cycles, and you just have to kind of go with that.
Yeah, yeah, this too shall pass type of
Oh
thing. And
yeah,
it's like,
definitely.
yeah. At BoldBrush, we inspire artists to inspire the world because creating art creates magic, and the world is currently in desperate need of magic. BoldBrush provides artists with free art marketing, creativity, and business ideas and information. This show is an example. We also offer written resources, articles, and a free monthly art contest open to all visual artists. We believe that fortune favors the bold brush. And if you believe that too, sign up completely free at boldbrushshow.com. That's BoldBrush show.com. The BoldBrush Show is sponsored by Faso. Now more than ever, it's crucial to have a website when you're an artist, especially if you want to be a professional in your career. Thankfully, with our special link, faso.com/podcast, you can make that come true and also get over 50% off your first year on your artist website. Yes, that's basically the price of 12 lattes in 1 year, which I think is a really great deal, considering that you get sleek and beautiful website templates that are also mobile friendly, e-commerce, print on demand in certain countries, as well as access to our marketing center that has our brand new art marketing calendar. And the art marketing calendar is something that you won't get with our competitor. The art marketing calendar gives you day-by-day, step-by-step guides on what you should be doing today, right now, in order to get your artwork out there and seen by the right eyes so that you can make more sales this year. So if you want to change your life and actually meet your sales goal this year, then start now by going to our special link, faso.com/podcast. That's faso.com/podcast. Yeah, and also, I also like this quote that I heard from one of our previous guests. He actually said in his book that he wrote, one of the quotes was, "Don't compare your insides to someone else's outside because you don't know what's going on there." And I like that you mentioned that. It's like, of course,
Oh
they
yeah.
probably had some duds, it's like, of course, because you've experienced it, right? At this point, you've gone through it enough times where like, I worked damn hard for this painting and it's beautiful now, but holy crap, did I make some mistakes in the previous ones? And that's fine. There's
Oh yeah.
more. Yeah, there's more that people don't see. And then I really want to touch on a really interesting factor, which is that you did have a day job, right? A sensible, quote
I
unquote,
have
sensible
I
job.
did have a sensible,
Um,
lots of them.
yeah. What was that transition like for you from quote unquote sensible job into full-time artist? What was that like?
So it was a slow transition because I think this was probably my low point where I was like, it's now or never. I was a physical therapist assistant. So I did a complete 180 from like, I was teaching art. I was doing some illustration stuff, like I was getting some assignments. And then it was like, we're going to go back to school. And the idea was that I could do this job part-time and just do art on the side. And and I did that for a little while, but I would show up at that job and it was just like soul crushing. It was just for me, I mean, I just couldn't stand it. I'm like, this is just not like, I just don't want to be massaging people's body parts, all day and like touching everyone's like feet. And I mean, I do respect it as a career. Don't get me wrong. But for me,
Mhm.
that is just not why I get up in the morning. And I had a hard time with that. So, I went and I got laid off because full disclosure, every one of my jobs, I kind of just did the bare minimum. Like I just could never go above and beyond like what like a star employee might do, where it's like you're going to stay late, you're going to pick up extra shifts, you're going to do this, and I just couldn't do it. I'm like, I didn't care enough.
Yeah.
That's just me. I'm like, I'm not an ass kisser. I'm not naturally that type of person. And I just
Mhm.
never pretended to be anything other than what I am. And I think the authenticity factor is always just been one that I'm proud of, but it didn't really serve me well in the, business world when I was working at these different jobs. So yeah, I did get laid off because I wasn't willing to pick up extra shifts because my extra time was devoted to creating art, of course, and I was protecting that time. So they did lay me off. So then I was like, oh shit, now what am I going to do? So it was a slow transition. My kids were young at the time. So I actually put out a little ad on Facebook. I was like, oh, I'm going to teach children's art classes so I can make
Aw.
some extra money in my house after school and use the money and just have that income while I worked on some art and tried to get the work out there and to be
Mhm.
successful as an artist. So that's what I did. I also did pick up some more illustration assignments through self-publishing authors on it was one of those websites where you bid on the jobs. So I
Oh.
picked up it was embarrassingly low money, but I'll tell you what, I was so excited to just be able to say that my job was to create art, even if it was making less money than you could make like flipping burgers. And I'm not even kidding you. It was, for me, it was just that important that like my identity was so closely tied to my ability to make art for money that I didn't even care. I was like, I'm going to bid on these jobs. I'm going to make peanuts for cash. But again, I'm building my portfolio because at this time I was still kind of like in an illustration phase. I'm like, I didn't care if I was like, I want to be a professional illustrator, even if that's all I could be. And I could never make it to, breaking into the fine art world. I was okay with that because anything was better than working as a physical therapist assistant, anything in the world. And so, I set the bar low and I was like, I'll teach art classes for a little while, and then I was doing the illustration and then I hit a wall with that. And that's when all the classes start. Like I was like the workshops that was the point in which I sought out some instruction from some well-known fine artists around here that were teaching workshops. And I think that was the turning point for me, where I started to gain the skills that were eventually going to pay the bills. And and it did take a while. It wasn't an overnight success by any means. You should see my first few landscapes. They're laughable, but they're an attempt. And but I look at those and I realize on a bad day sometimes I'm like, God, I've come so far. When I'm feeling like I can't get anything to work and it's just like this is so hard, and I'm like, I look and I'm like, I can't believe I went from this point to this point, and that's encouraging to me. And sometimes I will post those up to encourage other people that are starting on the same journey, just because it's, if you really look at the big picture, there's just been so much learned in the last 9 years, and there's still so much to learn. But yeah, so that was the transition. And over time, the more I practiced, the more I just kind of got better at what I was doing. That's when the sales started to increase. And it wasn't before I got to that basic level of competency where I could paint something that, looked pretty much like it was, what I was trying to convey. Like what my vision was with matching at a basic level on like what came out on the canvas. That's when I started to sell, and the prices were super cheap at this time. I was like, I just want to sell these paintings. So I saw, put the prices down low, just trying to gain a following, just try to get the work to move a little bit. And it's just kind of been a progression since then. Slowly, but just very, incrementally raising the prices, getting out there, getting more of a following. And it's been awesome, very encouraging, just to see my work pay off, to see how I work so hard, like I've never worked harder for any other employer than I work for myself. Even when I don't sell paintings, even when I'm, it's a slow season, I'm like, I just want to do this. This is so, important to me that I work day and night to just get something right and to just be able to, get my work out there the way I want it to be seen.
Yes. Yeah. And you're doing amazing. Like your
Thank
Instagram
you.
is like, you're welcome. Your Instagram is huge. Your paintings are gorgeous. You're hitting all of the I think like top dreams that any beginning artist would like want to reach out for. So I think you're one of like the best examples of everything that can go right if you just keep chugging your little train and keep trying hard,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sometimes people will make these well-meaning comments. They're not to be meant as insult, and I know that some other artists feel the same way as I do when they're like, "You're just so talented." And I'm just like, all right. I'm like, all right, I appreciate it. I do think there was some raw talent, because talent does keep you interested in something. However, this is not talent. Like any success that I enjoy today is just a product of hard work, determination, and the refusal to quit, and just like, digging in and just seriously just refusing to accept anything less than what my full capabilities are. And so that's the encouraging part to people who think that they maybe not be good enough or they don't have enough. This is skill. Like this is learned. I learned how to do this by showing up, learning, being willing to learn, keeping an open mind, not, deciding that like I knew everything, like I thought I did when I was in my 20s and I was going nowhere fast. It's really just, being coachable and just showing up and being, having an open mind to learn skills. And so this is all the skill that I've learned. I've learned very specific ones. It's all, I do landscapes. So for me, it was very important for me to learn how to manipulate the color, the values to create depth in my work. And so, the more the skills, once I started learning those skills and putting them to use, that's when people were responding to my work. And it wasn't because I was talented. It was because I learned how to mix these colors through doing color charts. And and trying, learning these skills on like what colors to put next to other colors so that they can, have an effect on you and based on what mood you're going for. And again, I just want to underscore the whole idea that this is all a skill set. And there's some talent involved a little bit, but I think it's like, oh my God, like 90% hard work and skill, and maybe 10% talent.
Absolutely. Yes, I also have the same issue with the word talent. There is raw talent out there. It exists, but it is, I think, far and few. It's mostly people who maybe have a little bit of that something, and that leads them to follow it. But there's very few people that I've seen who just immediately put a pencil on paper and know what they're doing. Like that's like maybe 1 out of 100 people.
And you'll read about them. Yeah, you'll
Yeah.
read about that person, that one person every
Mhm.
100 years or something. And it's like, oh, she was creating these at like age 8 without any classes. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I'll, that's talent, right? You can use
Mhm.
all the credits there. But for me and for the vast majority of everyone else, we
Mhm.
work our asses off.
Hard work.
And
Yeah.
I just want, and I have to make that clear that it's
Yes.
not chalked up to talent. Oh, I can do this for a living and I can make money because I'm just so talented. And they're well-meaning. They're not like trying to be rude
Yeah,
about
of
it, but it's like,
course.
come on, it's not easier for me than it is for anyone else. It's just it's hard freaking work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then, obviously in the world of painting, I have a very strong belief, from what I've seen and what I've heard from other artists on the podcast. Um, Good work always sells, right? It sells on its own. But sometimes, because I really want to talk to you a little bit more about marketing. What has been, the best way for you to sell your work? Has it been social media, galleries, maybe both?
So I would say definitely a combination of both. I do think that the Bold, like your platform, the Fine Art Studio Online, has been absolutely the best thing that ever happened to me. The whole Bold Brush, you guys do such a great job with the artists, and so I feel like you having that platform and like all of the promotion that goes into that has definitely helped. Independent of me sending out those newsletters, which I really hate writing. I'm going to be honest. I'm like my like creative expression is visual. Like when I have to sit down and write words, I'm like, I seriously dread it. Of course I do it. Like, just like I said, I'm like, you have to do things you don't want to do. But anyway, I do have an email subscriber list that over the years I have been able to build that through just the shows that I've done and, of course, your promotion as well. But the social media took a while to build that up as well. It started out with like, I was excited when I got 100 followers. I remember I was like, oh my God, I have 100 followers. Of course, I wasn't selling anything at that point. This was back right when I first started. But over time, my work got better. So, I started to sell a little bit on Instagram, and Instagram is great for some of those small studies. There's a lot of people on there, that have purchased my small studies. I sell directly to them. But for the larger works, the more expensive works, I have really enjoyed the gallery representation for some of those. It's the galleries, when you can find the right gallery, it's so valuable because it's a relationship. And I have been through a lot of, galleries that are not the right fit for me. It was, this is 9 years in the making. I think, right. It came out, guns blazing. I'm like, oh, I got to get into a gallery, so I was like, reaching out to all these galleries. I was trying to get into them and they were like, oh yeah, we'll try you out. What I learned is that the galleries that work the best for me are the ones that were passionate about my work and actually sought me out. perfect. That's the honest truth. Is the ones that emailed me and they're like, "Hey, we love your work." Those are the ones that did the best for me because they were all in. They were invested in my work and my vision. They were very particular about the artists that they took, and nobody was competing with anyone else in the gallery, which is another awesome thing. Is that like they handpick their artists to kind of complement one another, but not to compete within the gallery. So it's like no one is like has my exact style in any of any of the galleries that I'm in. And they've done a great job. And so some of the galleries will bring you customers that come to your website to buy things that are only available through you. So it's just been just a combination. There's a diverse kind of, I don't know what the word is, but it's not any one thing really.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that I've learned is to get my work out there is I started entering the national shows so I could kind of expand out to other states. And I have done pretty well selling at some of those shows, the Oil Painters of America. If you can get into those, they're not easy to get into, but I was so honored to get into some of those, and I sold directly through those galleries. So then you get, some followings through the pop-up shows. So yeah, I would say my regular representation and my online Instagram, Facebook, and then, the shows that come up throughout the year. They're just like the weekend shows. And that's kind of how I sell.
Yeah, I agree. It's good to have huh, better yet, it is not good to have all your eggs in one basket, right? It's good to always spread out your efforts in different ways that could bring those multiple streams. Because if you're just dependent on one, maybe one day that gallery shuts down, and then what do you do? So it's very good to have that backup of, oh, I'll try this and this and this, and then newsletter is actually such
Yes,
a big deal. I think it's very underrated
it
as a
is.
tool. Yeah, to even like you said, selling smaller works, or selling things that, oh well, I don't really, it's not really that big to put in a gallery, or my gallery isn't too interested. It's just like a fun thing that I did. I'm just gonna put on my website. That's like, oh,
Well, definitely. And I think having different price points as well has been
mhm,
helpful. So, I definitely am trying to get into painting bigger. And when I paint these giant paintings, they cost a fortune a frame. And those usually will go to a show or a gallery because
mm,
that's hard to sell those directly. I mean, it's happened to me before, but it's not all the time. So I will give those to a gallery. But sometimes I'll do plein air study or I'll do something really just small and I just don't frame it. I'll throw it up on my plein air unframed works section on my website, and it's a few $100s. Like you just have a range of prices. People love that because you're going to appeal to people who don't have a lot of wall space. They don't have a high budget, but they do love to collect your art. And I love when people like, oh, I love your work, but I really can't afford the big one. So plein air study is not too, it doesn't take me a long time, and it's
mhm.
just something that they value, and I love to sell those. So there's just, yeah, and then they'll have the mid-sized works or like the refined small works that you framed that could be like around 1,000 or like 1,500, something like that. It's just a broad range of prices. So that, and I found that to be extremely helpful in getting my work to move
Yeah.
through various price points and budgets.
Yeah, that's really excellent advice too, because obviously, like especially with Instagram, you mostly just have I want to say like younger people, or even like students, or usually people who don't have as much disposable income as someone who, like, compared to someone who's like a collector who, collects through galleries, right? So it's
Right.
good to have like that reachable point for someone who's like a really, really big fan, but like they can't afford it, but they want to support you, and have like a little
Yeah.
piece of you. And
And trust
I,
me. Yeah.
mhm,
Yeah, no, and trust me, when I tell you I have art like coming out of my ears, I'm like the art pile is like so high. Then I'm like, I
mhm.
have to sell some of these paintings because so it actually works out great.
Yeah.
Because I have all those paintings, so I need to make room for more paintings. So just,
Mm.
here, can have it unframed.
Yeah, yeah, everyone benefits, which is excellent. And then do you have any advice for, say, someone who wants to get into, first of all, technique wise, wants to get into plein air, but then also wants to take those first steps into becoming someone who lives from their work? What advice would you give?
I would say for plein air, honestly, the best piece of advice would just find a workshop, because I think if you're going to go out there by yourself and you've never been out there, you're going to be overwhelmed, and it's the hardest thing that I do. I Somebody once said, one of my gallery owners actually came with this quote. He's like, going out plein air painting is like taking your brain to the gym. Like it's exhausting, and like, just there's so much going on. So I would say, try to find a workshop to teach you the basics, and like, what materials you bring. And my way of looking at plein air, which actually helped me a lot to be less overwhelming, is that I'm literally out there to gather information. I'm not, if I put the pressure on myself where I'm like, I need to come up with a good painting and I have to have everything right and a good composition, I was setting myself for extreme failure and disappointment. And I've seen those artists out there. They enter the competitions. It's amazing. They're amazing. I am just, that's not what I aspire to. I want to get the plein air information to be able to fuel my studio paintings the best way I can, so that I am, getting that information that you can't get from a photograph. And so literally it's the simplest thing. All you really have to kind of simplify it, where you're not finishing a painting. It doesn't even matter what the painting looks like. You just have to record the things that you can't get from the photo, which are temperature, values, the hues, which again is the temperature. And that is when I lowered the bar down to where I just am going out there. I'm just going to go and get the colors of the clouds, put them on the panel. Some of those subtleties that you really, like those big billowing clouds are so hard to paint from a photo. You get the colors down. Don't worry about the composition as much. Don't worry about the trees, the branches, those things you can get from a photo. A photo is a tool. And a plein air painting is also a tool. So once I did that, the pressure on myself was non-existent anymore. It's still difficult. I still go out there and I'm like, oh my God, what do I start with? I'm like, I gotta simplify this. It's not easy. I'm never gonna say I'm like, oh, this has gotten easy for me. So I would say just the way you look at it will determine how the experience is for you. So I'm trying to gather up information that I see directly with my own eyes. And as far as making a living or making money off your work, I think it's such a slow process. It's going to be slower than you want it to be. It's just because these skills to build to a level where you can consistently put out work that's good and saleable, it's going to take a while. But you always have to realize why you're doing it. It shouldn't be just to make money. I don't think any artist is in this just to make money. I think that you have to love the process of it. You have to always remember why you're doing it and just enjoy the process of creating art. And just celebrate the small victories. It's not going to be like all of a sudden you go from like you don't paint at all, you don't know what you're doing. You go plein air painting one time and then you go to selling like a $10,000 painting. Like, it doesn't work that way. You go out there, you just kind of it's a career, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So, and I will say this is that while you are trying to make money, I know a lot of artists, there's no shame in having a side gig, like, something, a part-time job. You may hate it. Like, I hated mine all the time, but, it's a necessary part of the thing. And then knowing that eventually, if you really put the time in and you're really invested in your work, you can eventually break free of it. And just, it's over time, you'll make that progress and your work will get more attention and you'll get higher end collectors and you'll get more visibility, but you just can't rush it, because there's just you learn so much so fast. Like, I just think that it's a learning curve. Whenever you're learning a new skill, it's just going to take a while, and it's going to take, failed paintings and a lot of, again, rejection from shows, and you have to build up a thick skin. You have to. If you don't, you're not gonna survive. And be able. And the other thing I would say is this was kind of come into play with the question about, when I was getting instruction, and it's like, be able to take a tough critique, because I didn't like the people that were like, oh, it's so good. It's like, I tell me that it sucks. Like, just tell me why it sucks. Like, I need tough coaching, because that's the only way you're going to get better. If somebody is brutally honest with you, we don't need to sugarcoat things. I didn't, I never really learned from professors, teachers that would be too nice, and they were afraid to insult me. And I know there are people that get very offended and they're like, oh my God, I'm like, I suck. You have to be willing to take instruction and, have the brutal truth and, spoken to you. So
Yeah.
that's what I would say.
I love it. Yeah, yeah, and it's so true. And I've mentioned this before, with my online students, I always tell them, I was like, when you're learning this craft, you're gonna be facing your demons, and it's not gonna be easy. You're gonna be right smack in front of all of your flaws, and you have to own up to them in order to improve them. Like they're just like know that they're not your limit. Like they don't mean anything. Like your worth isn't equivalent to those flaws. If anything, those flaws are changeable and your worth is limitless. So those are two separate things, but it's so hard for people to separate it. But your work will always improve. Like they're separate things. Which with the tough skin, that makes perfect sense. It's like
You have
that's
to be really bad at something. Everything anyone has ever done, they're really, really bad at it before they're good at it. And so if you're one of the people that can't stand to be bad at something, then you're probably never going to achieve, if you have a big goal, it's like it's just the only way out is through. And so literally it's like you're going to make some bad paintings, and you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with just looking at something that's bad and knowing that you can just make something else and just keep trying, and it will get better over time. But it's faster when you have somebody, a mentor, when you're not working in a vacuum, when you have another set of eyes on it, have somebody to critique. Even if you sign up like online, I know there's instructors that will do online, critiquing, a virtual class. Just get some outside help, because that is discouraging when you question everything. You're like making a painting, you're like, does this work? I don't know. What about it? You need to have some fresh eyes on it. So if at all possible, try to find somebody who's better than you to break down your work, critique your work. I think, a lot of good instructors have a balance. They know that if they're too harsh, you're going to want to quit. So I think, a good instructor will tell you what's working. Of course, there's probably something that's working, and then they'll tell you what's not working. And I think that's a great way to be motivated to kind of improve what you're doing.
absolutely. Yes. And then I do have a kind of a funny question
Okay.
that I decided to include at least in this season of the podcast. And that is aside from painting, right? Do you have any other topic that you're secretly like extremely knowledgeable about that maybe has nothing to do with painting, but maybe also feeds your painting?
So yeah, I'm not sure how well it directly feeds my painting, but I'm super into exercise science, fitness, exercise science, nutrition. As I said, I did go into the physical therapy because I had a background in it, and I'm very passionate about it. I work out every day. I get in the gym, lift. I also have been a lifelong runner. And I think what feeds my creativity more than just my gym going is probably my running outside. Like I have to be out in nature every day, and it's multitasking because I'm getting inspiration. I'm also getting some exercise because I'm running, walking, hiking. So yeah, I do have to work out every day, but I what the connection with that is that it helps my mental health. And so when my mental health is good, my work reflects that. And the best example of that is that I had a few foot surgeries a few years back where I was immobile, like I was on crutches, I couldn't walk, like I was like not weight bearing for many weeks. Every single one of those times, without exception, I got into a huge creative funk, because my work is a reflection of what I see in the world as I go through my daily journey, like all the things that I do, whether I'm driving, walking, running, it doesn't matter. Like I'm always seeing something, it like clouds or fog or just anything at all. So it's so critical for me to be outside. And again, clearing my head, doing some sort of exercise. And I will, I'll bring my phone with me. I'll get photos. I'll observe things. I'll paint in my head while I run. And it does feed my creativity, just the whole like working out thing. So
Mhm.
definitely it plays into that. And then of course when I was able to walk again, I was like, oh, the ideas came flowing back. What a surprise. I'm like, now I can
Mm.
go outside and walk again, and now I can feed my soul with all of the beauty that is nature, that I thrive on and that I want to bring to my back into my studio. So it definitely, that is a huge thing for me, is just
Yeah.
being able to be outside nature and mobile.
Yes. Yeah, that's I think as artists, that mind-body connection is so important. I'm also a weightlifter. I'm not a runner, but I'm a weightlifter, and I find that I get my best ideas the days that I hit the gym and I'm like, or I lift more weight than before. One, it's encouraging as hell. So that's a confidence booster. And then two, even between sets when I'm like, in resting, maybe I'm reading or maybe I'm like, I suddenly get an image for a painting and I'm like, oh, yes, okay. And then the days that I don't go, like if I take a week off for any reason, maybe I had to travel or I had a bunch of other stuff to do, those are the hardest weeks of my life. Like I'm just stuck in my head all day and I call it like a hamster stuck in a wheel in my head and it just doesn't stop. And I just spiral into
I
negativity.
That resonates so much. I should say I am a runner, but I used to run like 6 days a week. Now I run twice a week, and I lift I lift a lot more than I run. But I do go outside and I'll walk after I lift just to get
Mhm.
some movement
Cardio.
outside. But yeah, I love the weights. I just think that there's the mental health boost for that also does play into the work, although I can't make a direct connection where it's like, oh, I don't see things that I'm going to paint while I'm lifting. Although, you
Mhm.
know what, we have big windows at our gym, and I'll be in the middle of a set and I'm looking at these atmosphere perspective, and the way the sun is hitting the trees, I'm just never not painting ever. So yeah, I will say that when the big windows and I'm like, oh, I can see it's all hazy out there, I'm like, I gotta get out there and get those clouds before they go away. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just never not painting in my head or actual
Mhm.
painting.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
great question.
Oh,
Great question.
I'm
Love it.
happy I included it. Yeah, I've had some very
Yeah.
interesting answers.
Oh,
So
really?
far, yeah, so far, the previous person, his name is Kai Loon. He actually he does like dancing. Um, so it's very
Oh,
interesting how a lot of us as artists have chosen like things that require movement of some sort, whether it's hiking or like weightlifting or dancing. So I
yep.
think yeah, I think I'm happy that I'm asking that question
Well,
because it
this is
also.
also a
Mhm.
sedentary, job, like career. It's pretty sedentary for the most
Yeah.
part. So I'm like that. I can't just sit here. I'm like, I'm gonna go stir crazy. So yeah, I do start my day usually with some sort of a workout, and then I'll sit here. My head feels clear, and I feel creative, and I can do this. But yeah, it's
Yes.
for sure. You have to move.
Absolutely.
Mind,
Yes.
body.
Mind-body
Yep,
connection.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, do you have any events coming up, any shows, workshops, etc., that you'd like to mention?
So, not like shows. I'm going to be entering some jury shows coming up, but of course, I don't know whether I'll get into them. I mean, I'll have a show up in the fall, but I'm just right now I have like a sea of paintings that are like 90% done that I need to finish. So just to get them to my galleries, because my galleries have done awesome lately. They've sold some paintings. So I just need to
Mhm.
replace those. And, but yeah, as far as shows, I had a bunch of shows, a cluster of shows in the spring that were great, awesome, big shows that I was so excited to be in. But at this point, it's slowed to the point where it's an inventory creating phase. And
Mhm.
but yeah, I'll definitely have some more of the shows in the fall.
Great. Yeah. And then, where can people find more of your work?
My work is on my website, which is hillaryscottfineart.com, and my Instagram handle, which is a lot of not just finished works, but a lot of works in progress, behind the scenes stuff, is Hillary Scott underscore fine art. And if you follow me there, you can see all the works in progress.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Hillary, and for your awesome advice. This
Thank
was
you so
really fun.
much for having me
Of
on.
course.
It
Yes,
was wonderful
yes.
talking art. I could talk shop all day. So
Heck yeah. Oh, me too. That's why I'm
it's
on the
so
podcast.
fun. I know. I'm like, I can't talk about this with my family as much. But yeah, get me with another artist and I'll talk about this stuff all day. So it's been
Yes,
wonderful, wonderful to just chat about all these topics. And
yeah,
again, thank you so much for having me on.
of course. And thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you.